Level up your LA Kings experience with the new Vivid Seats Elite Seats. All the on-ice Kings action with even more exclusive access. Enjoy great seats to the game along with premier dining inside the Lexus Club with all-you-can-eat food and non-alcoholic beverages. Plus, get a free Team LA Kings item and parking with your purchase. Score your Vivid Seats Elite Seats tickets today and earn rewards on each purchase from the only ticket company that rewards you for buying. Experience it live with Vivid Seats, the official partner of the LA Kings.
You're listening to an LA Kings podcast. For more episodes of this and every other Kings program, visit lakings.com/podcast.
You're listening to All the Kings Men, the official podcast of the LA Kings. Now, here's your host, Jesse Cohen.
All right, it is time for our three-quarters check-in on the top 10 questions facing the LA Kings for the 2024-25 season. Nick Nixon and Jim Fox joined me for our previous conversations. They joined me again today. How are you doing today, Nick?
Doing great, Jesse. Great to be back with you.
And how are you doing, Jim?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jess. Welcome back.
Thank you. So let's dive straight into it. The original question was, how will the D-Corps be deployed in Drew Doughty's absence? Now, he has since returned, and I would say relatively recently. There was, I don't know about the two of you, but I guess I sort of assumed that when Drew Doughty returned, he would be immediately paired with Mikey Anderson again. But Jim, it took, 12 games for them to go back to that pairing?
Yeah, I think leading into it, Jim Hiller gave us a pretty good indication he was going to stick with Gavrikov and Anderson because it was going so well. But yeah, I think you're right. In the back of everyone's mind, I chatted with Drew 5 days ago, and he just used the word comfortable about 73 times when talking about Mikey and that type of stuff. And so that's it. I just once again I'll mention, what a great job Gavrikov did moving to the right side. I mean, he just excelled there, and that really helped out the team.
And Nick, I don't know if it's coincidence. I don't know if it's the nature of the beast that the body leads the head, or the head leads the body. But Rob Blake spoke to the media following the trade deadline and mentioned the organization's desire to return to the D pairs that we assumed the season would start with: Doughty and Anderson, Gavrikov and Spence, Edmondson and Clark. And then Jim Hiller spoke to the media by the next day or whatever before the next game and confirmed what Rob Blake said. And since then, in 3 games, we've seen those pairs. So like I said, I don't know if that's, I don't know if there's anything to it other than the two of them probably communicate all the time, but both men said it, and that's what we're seeing.
Yeah, a couple of things with what we've seen the last few games, and who knows if we'll see it the rest of the year. But I think everybody likes left shot with a right shot. And that's what we've got right now. And the other thing is, because you're in a playoff race, although it looks real good right now for the Kings to make the playoffs, I think you want to go with a lineup that gives you the most options. And by that, talking about the defensemen, players that have a good all-around game. Spence can provide you some offense. Gavrikov, Clark certainly can, even though he's young and he's sat out a couple of games. So I think these 6 players, they have the edge over Moverara and Burrows, because I think in the big scheme of things, they can bring more to the table on any given night than the 2 that aren't playing. So combined lefty-righty, and it's a defensive core that has not scored a lot all season. It's been near the bottom in the NHL. But I think to maximize what you have on your roster, I think these are the 6 that should be playing.
Yeah, Nick, if I could just add, it's you're 100%. Every coach wants to go righty-lefty. It is a nice mix too, and I think the Kings are comfortable with a mix in that you have a mobile guy with a stay-at-home guy on each pair. And that's where kind of Moverara and Burrows kind of get left out. Moverara would be considered probably the stay-at-home guy. Kyle probably doesn't bring the mobility type of things as much as the other 2 guys. So it's a nice mix. It's something you look for. And then I think what we've seen is this. in late period situations and penalty kill situations and those types of things, I think then they really load up the four. Doughty, Anderson, Gavrikov, and Edmondson. They load those up with that responsibility. And, of course, on the power play, the other two guys get a chance.
The one pairing that I noticed that sort of caught my eye, and they haven't played a ton together. It's only 14 minutes and 22 seconds at all strengths across the last 3 games. So it's not a lot, but it's Edmondson and Gavrikov. Because at the end of each game, Edmondson is still getting those minutes, and you saw it late against the Islanders when the Kings were killing penalties. Edmondson was out there, and obviously Clark and Spence are not going to get a ton of penalty kill time. So, I mean, Jim Hiller is still finding a way to play his top 4.
Absolutely. And, the Kings penalty kill has been a strength when you look at the overall defensive scheme of the team. And defensively, they've been good all season in a lot of different areas, and PK has been part of it. But, yeah, even with Doughty coming back, of course, he gives you another option to kill a penalty. But it's nice to maybe give Doughty a rest sometime from the PK so he's fresher in other situations. And that's why the addition of Edmondson, Gavrikov, Anderson. Gavrikov, against the Islanders, when the Kings killed off all 8 penalties, he was out there a lot in that game and wound up being out there for all 4 Kings goals. Of course, 2 of them were shorthanded while he's out there killing a penalty. But, I think, again, getting back to what I was talking about earlier, I think right now this set of defense for the Kings is their best option right now moving forward. Now, the trade deadline has come and gone. The only way you're going to change it is if there are injuries and you're recalling people or inserting people already on your roster. So
it's interesting, guys. The time on ice shorthanded the other night. And again, it speaks exactly what you're talking about, Nick. You have Gavrikov coming in at 8 minutes and 49 seconds, shorthanded.
Yeah.
You have Mikey Anderson coming in at 11 minutes, 46 seconds, shorthanded. So, yeah, that was a load for those guys.
Yeah, almost 12 minutes shorthanded is that's a lot of work. Next question, and this one we changed up a little bit. Next question was, will the changes to the special teams yield positive results? An aggressive PK, Clark, and Laferriere on power play 1. Now, I added Kuzmenko to the wrinkle for this conversation because he was acquired at the trade deadline. But Nick, and in the St. Louis shootout loss, I believe it was either Jim or Daryl, and apologies for not remembering who, but somebody said that when your power play isn't clicking, isn't scoring, and the other team knows it, it becomes a target for the penalty killers. And the penalty killers will begin to play more aggressively against that power play. Now, in that game, at the start of the third period, the Kings had the power play. They had not yet added Kuzmenko. And from my perspective, watching from the office on the TV, it seemed like St. Louis, the Kings power play had been obviously inefficient all season, but I hadn't seen them give up momentum on a power play until that power play. And it seemed to me as if St. Louis did in fact target them and did start taking the momentum. And then for the first 10 minutes of the third period, it felt to me like St. Louis gained momentum from that Kings power play and controlled the third period. The very next game was the first game that Kuzmenko was on the team, and it was a totally different power play to me. So can adding one guy really have that kind of a positive turnaround on a special teams unit?
Well, I'll chime in here first. 3 games right now with Kuzmenko, and he's gotten power play time on that first unit, basically replacing Laferriere. To me, it's too early to determine if he's going to be a factor positively or negatively. My first impressions of him are he reminds me of a player that played with the Russians 30 years ago that's always looking to make the perfect pass instead of looking for the shot. Now, that being said, 3 years ago in Vancouver, He scored 39 goals. He played most of that season with Pettersson, who's a great playmaker. So the jury, for me, is still out on his effectiveness on the Kings power play moving forward. But again, veteran presence. He's an older player. He's 29. Certainly more experience than a guy like Laferriere, another right shot that's had some time on the power play this year. But I think it's too early to really, for me, to say whether or not he's going to be good or bad or indifferent on the power play.
The reason I would say that the Kings power play will improve is a couple of different things than they deal with Kuzmenko. First of all, he's a right-hand shot, which gives him different angles. Second, he's experienced around the net. The scouting report I get is he doesn't score with a lot of shots, so to speak. It's more rebounds and tips and getting there and hanging around. And third is, with Kempe and Fiala already on the power play, there's only one puck. And I think you have enough shooters there. And I think Kuzmenko could be the guy that facilitates. And then I go one more. He's a one-touch player. If the Kings have had issues this year, and Jesse, I would say I think they have given up momentum throughout the entire year on the power play. But he's the type of guy that, keeps the energy up because it's one touch, and it's not standing with a puck.
In the 3 games that he's been there, and I agree with you, Nick, it's 3 games. It's way too early to tell. I mean, they've only had so many minutes on the power play. But the power play, and I talked to Zach Dooley about this. I can live with, I don't love it, but I can live with an inefficient power play. If your power play is 32nd out of 32nd in the NHL, it needs work. We can talk about it. We can flag it as a problem area, but I can live with it. The concern for me is when it starts bleeding momentum the other way. And Zach mentioned, I think I wasn't there to hear it, but I think Jim Hiller said that the power play had cost them 8 to 10 points in the standings or something like that. And Jim, if you feel like the power play has been leaking momentum, then that's not great. But in the 3 games that since Kuzmenko's been here, I felt like every time the Kings were on the power play, they had the other team on their back heel. And I mean, it's tiny sample size, but in 4 minutes and 55 seconds of power play time that he's played since he's been here, the numbers are tilted the right way in the Kings' favor across the board. So,
if I was unclear, or I believe by your statement, I think you misunderstood what I was saying. Before Kuzmenko joined the Kings, the Kings leaked momentum many times.
Gotcha. All right. So the next question then was, will Jim Hiller continue to be an unpredictable, creative, unconventional coach in a full season? Over the last 3 games, I have to say the most unconventional, surprising thing about Jim Hiller has been the lack of surprises, Nick.
Yeah, really. We keep tracking the Kings' record when they go 11-7.
Yeah.
But that seems to be on the back burner. And, well, you put a lineup together and you win. You usually stick with it. And we've seen the same lineup for 3 games now since Kuzmenko was inserted up front with Kopitar and Kempe. And the Kings, now, some of the games haven't been things of beauty, but 3 wins in 3 games. So why change? And unless I think you go into another tailspin, the Kings recently had, 5 games without a win before this modest winning streak. I don't think you're going to see a lot of changes. Now, they're healthy. They do have 2 extra forwards, 2 extra defensemen. I do like what I've seen from that, quote, 4th line with Hellenius, Jeannot, and Turcotte. I think they have played with the puck mostly in the other team's end as opposed to defending. They've been physical. Even Turcotte has thrown some good checks to play off his new line mates. So as long as that stays, if that is status quo game after game, really, there's no reason to change it. Now, you've got a veteran like Trevor Lewis. He can give you that option if you feel you need to get him in. He's not going to hurt you, certainly, because he's got all that experience. But, yeah, I think right now, isn't it time, Jesse and Jim, for the Kings to be focusing on preparing the team for a playoff series, finding out what is their best lineup, and maybe this is going to be their best lineup.
Yeah, I believe since before Kuzmenko joined the Kings, I'm going back 3 weeks now, regardless of whether the lines were changing or not, I believe that at least, and I'm going to concern myself with the top three, the top 9 guys, the top 3 lines. I thought it was the most defined identities on those lines that we've seen all year. And since then he's kind of stuck with things more so than he has in the past. But I think what you're saying, Nick, has been already started. Again, at least 3 weeks ago, I think they defined. And then, the decision is whether Big Sammy will be here and play in the playoffs. And I think I agree with you, Nick. If you base it on what's happened lately, they have an identity. They're playing to it. When Turcotte plays with, for instance, Kempe and Kopitar, he is a complementary player. Of course, as a fourth liner, you're probably already considered a role complementary player. But with that line, he's the driver of that line. He is the speed on that line. He is the energy on that line. And the other 2 guys are north-south, take the body and work it. And now you add that to the identities being identified and put into place. I think the Kings are in a position now where they know what they want going into the playoffs.
Jim, I really like the combination of Foegele, Danault, and Moore. Am I just unabashedly in love with Danault and Moore, or is that a good combo in your eyes?
Spoke to the guys in this sense, but I'll say this. I think Danault's wingers fit him better than the other guys he was playing with. I think Danault has been a little bit uptick in offense, just assist for sure, which is a good factor, right? Because you got speed on both sides. But I just think that fits. So again, the Kings have identified, and we'll see in the next 3 games when Jim puts them into the blender again. But no, I don't think they're going. I think they're going to stick with that. I think it's defined, and Foegele continues to impress. I think even out of the break, the Four Nations face-off break, I think he has prioritized more of an offensive standpoint, because all season long, his penalty kill, his forecheck, the angles he takes, the smarts he uses, and how he incorporates that speed that he has into his game, I think has been very good. At this point with Trevor Moore, I do believe now that the injury he had earlier this year was lingering longer than we thought, because he's back on his game now.
The answer that Jim Hiller gave to, I believe it was Austin Stanovich's question about Trevor Moore changing the curve of his blade, was as vulnerable and honest an answer I've ever heard a coach give about anything. The question was essentially, Trevor Moore changed the curve of his blade. Did you think you'd see that kind of improvement? And Jim Miller's answer was no, I didn't think it would matter that much, but oh my gosh, it clearly has.
Yeah, I was there at the time, and I'll go 2 ways on this one. The other thing he said was players change their curve too much because they're looking for an answer that's probably not there, right? It's not the arrow, it's the archer. And the other thing is, I think, to me, this is where Jim Hiller is different than other coaches. Those are the types of things he talks about. He talks about an individual aspect of a player, incorporates that into the team concept. A curve, you can't get any more personal than a curve for a player. And Jim knows exactly how that feels, and he's able to have that conversation.
You caught me completely by surprise. Sorry, go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, no, I would say, I think to Jim's point with Trevor Moore, I think he probably did have issues health-wise earlier, because he just seems to be moving better, maybe a little bit quicker. He's put on some great one-on-one moves the past couple of weeks. We didn't see that earlier in the season. And for Warren Foegele, has there been a more consistent forward all season long? You chart him out with who are the top 5 Kings forwards in goals, assists, points, plus minus penalty kill, which he's always on. He never plays on the power play, but he's right up there with everybody, if not the top. His plus minus, I believe, is not only the best on the team as we speak at plus 26, but that's among the league leaders. So, yeah, when a player's having that kind of season, he can only help no matter who he's playing with. But that combined with a healthy Moore and the veteran leadership and savvy of Philippe Deneau, pretty good combination.
Sorry, go
ahead, Jim.
Yeah, Trevor Moore again. The way I was describing it earlier was he was moving the puck, he had the puck, and he was getting right to that point where he's going to be dangerous, and then nothing. Now he's moving the puck, now he's dangerous. So that last little piece, he's found a way to incorporate that skill, and overall team-wide, he gives the opposition another one-on-one player to worry about. And we don't talk about that with the Kings because they don't necessarily have a lot of that. But it's nice when the other team is worrying about you.
We're going to use Warren Foegele as a way to transition to our next question because he plays with Phil Deneau at even strength. But on the penalty kill, he's been playing with Quinton Byfield. And Jim, I've been referencing a conversation that you and I had, and I can't remember if it was in one of these top 10 questions or a different one, but you said that Quinton Byfield would begin scoring from distance. And he certainly has. And so the next question was, will Quinton Byfield continue his strong play at center in the preseason? He only, quote unquote, only has 38 points in 63 games. But I think anybody would argue that the growth of Quinton Byfield this season has to be viewed as a positive.
The impact. Mm-hmm. The impact that he's having. He is a fixture. I think we are ready, if it continues, if the consistency continues, and all three of us have talked about that this year. Quinton Byfield, by the end of the season, had to be your number one center. And he's making a pretty good argument for that right now. If the team is going to continue to grow, it can't just rely on Kopitar. And Philippe Deneau kind of falls in a little bit category underneath that. But yeah, QB has done it. His next hurdle, and I'm looking ahead, and Nick mentioned it. I'm going to assume the Kings are going to be in the playoffs. His next hurdle will be into the playoffs as a number one centerman, as the other team going on him and making sure that they're controlling him and, the top defense pairs, those types of things. Guys trying to get under his skin a little bit more, trying to rattle him physically. That's his next challenge. And you just hope the growth continues.
And the other thing with his growth, Jim and Jesse, is that we've seen him be incorporated into the penalty killing unit. He and Foegele are out there quite a bit together. That's something we didn't see in his first 3+ seasons with the Kings. And then, of course, the switch from left wing to center, he's been a center full time this year. And the other thing is, at what point does everybody feel comfortable? Because if he's going to be your number one center, doesn't he have to be on your number one power play? So to me, that's the next step we're waiting to see in Byfield's growth is, can he play in every situation and be effective in every situation? Certainly, we've seen it 5-on-5. We've seen it on the penalty kill. And now, okay, down the road, how about the power play?
You know what we hear all the time, guys? We hear all the time the phrase from players, coaches, when you come to work every day, you're just trying to get better. You're just trying to improve. Every day you work. There's no better example than Quinton Byfield. It's not too long ago we talked about, his stick is too short. He can't shoot the puck. He doesn't get. We had a graphic last night, Nick, on the Islander game where he's top 10% in shot velocity. And of course, with that confidence now, he's using it a little bit more. And Jesse, we witnessed it firsthand. Every single day working on it this year, early on, to the point where he was tagging one-timers. He was standing at the top of the dot, leaning into wrist shots, and I'm going, man, this is better. That's better. He's getting better. And now it's showing up in the game.
The biggest impact that I think I can attribute to Quinton Byfield is earlier this season, for whatever reason, Kevin Fiala was struggling to find the chemistry with Danault and Moore that he had last season. And he was struggling to find a spot in the lineup where he was as dangerous as Kevin Fiala needs to be and can be. And if Quinton Byfield can be a permanent line mate of Kevin Fiala, and the two of them can be dangerous together, that by itself has tremendous value, because, it was a year ago, I think, that, Kevin Fiala was on a line in the playoffs with Blake Lizotte and Trevor Lewis or something, right? Like, where people were saying that Kevin Fiala was most productive when playing with lunch pail type players. And there needs to come a time where that's not the case. And so if Quinton Byfield is going to take over that role and he's going to bring Kevin Fiala with him, well, so much the better. I mean, then you're talking about a multiplying factor of impact. And I think John Hoven gave Dooley credit for the phrase "the Fiala whisperer." But if Byfield is going to be improving his own game and increasing his shot velocity and his ability to score from distance, and was he on 4 games in a row now with a goal, and he's, getting physical and he's killing penalties and he's doing all these things, and then he also makes one of your most talented wingers or makes one of your most talented wingers more comfortable playing higher in the lineup, I just think that's a tremendous value.
Well, you give the credit to Byfield, and he definitely deserves it. We know what Laferriere does. He's dropped off offensively as far as goals, but he is always that complimentary guy that usually allows other guys to do what they do, because he seems to be there to protect and help. But I'm going to give some credit to Kevin Fiala, because he changed. He's made the change. We're always still worried, right? Is he going to revert back to that cross-ice pass and everyone's standing there going, what's going on? Or is he going to take those dumb penalties? He had a retaliation penalty not too long, but few and far between now. So that's where, let's be honest here. If Kevin keeps playing the way he has, it's a big improvement for the team. Because again, the way he was playing before, with the risk involved in his game, that makes him the guy that's tough to play with. He's the type of guy, right, because of his skill that should make other guys better. Well, with the mindset he had, he was hurting that. Because again, the other 4 guys on the ice are watching him make a risky move. Believe me, they're not on their toes. They're on their heels in case the move doesn't work. So then it's 1-on-5 all the time. So Kevin's made that change, and I commend him for that. Again, now it'll be going into the playoffs, much like I mentioned with QB. Can he take that same thing into the playoffs and have the same mental approach, and don't let the pressure or the intensity of the playoffs change that mindset?
Nick, Jim mentioned Alex Laferriere. Our next question was, will Alex Laferriere be a capable line mate for Kopitar and Kempe? That's because when the season started, we thought that's what the line would be. Obviously not the case anymore at this point. So I tweaked the question to, will Kuzmenko be a capable or at least permanent line mate for Kopitar and Kempe? We're only 3 games in, and it's a tough 3 games, right? He came in, he showed up, and then 3 games in 4 nights, no practice, no opportunity to get to know his teammates, get to know the team. I'm sure he's only had brief conversations with the coaching staff. But Nick, thoughts on Kuzmenko, Kopitar, and Kempe as a permanent line of some sorts?
Yeah, well, I hope it works, because that means you don't have to worry about the other 2 lines and shaking things up again. So if, I guess an option could be you put Turcotte back there, but I think they have a pretty good idea what Turcotte is going to bring when he plays with Kopitar and Kempe. But I want to talk a little bit about Laferriere, and because he started the season or has played with Kopitar on his line with Kempe. I don't think Laferriere is going to play because he is a responsible forward. He's going to get his share of goals, his share of power play time. Who knows? Maybe down the road some PK, but that's not needed right now. But Laferriere is a player that I think if you're a head coach, if you're Jim Hiller, no matter what line you put him on, with Kopitar, with Deneau, with Byfield, okay, that's good. We don't have to worry about him. We know how he's going to play. For me, he's one of those players that is so consistent in his defensive structure. He gets his share of scoring chances. He's one of those reliable players that, okay, if this line is struggling, we can always put Laferriere there. It'll calm things down. So I think it's more, yeah. Do I hope that Kuzmenko stays with Kopitar? Yeah, because that means they're playing well. But a default could be somebody else. But, you know, to Laferriere's credit, I think wherever he plays, he doesn't hurt the team and he doesn't hurt his line mates. If what I said makes
yeah. I'm going to take one step at a time, Nick. I'm right now still looking at Kuzmenko, and I know the Kings don't get a lot of opportunities, but as a power play specialist. That was the biggest hole they had. If he can just fill that hole, I don't care who he plays with. Of course, he'll earn more ice time. I think he's bought into the Kings man-on-man coverage in the games he's played. Defensive zone, that's a hard responsibility because in other systems, you switch off. If someone gets down below the hash marks, then it becomes a defenseman's responsibility. When you're man-on-man, you got to be there. You got to be committed, and you got to be reliable. So far, he's done that. But if he can just have an effect on the quick movement on the power play, that's all I'm looking for. And just to follow up, Nick, on Laferriere, the way I look at it is this. When we say hockey IQ, so many times we're talking about the offensive side. Understanding when that next chance is going to be. Where's the opening? With Laferriere, he has it the other way. He sniffs out danger about 2 plays before it's going to happen or 2 seconds before it happens, and he's there to stop it before it goes any further.
Next question, and I wanted to leave some extra room for this one because I think there's so much more positive to say about it than I ever would have expected. The next question was, will the added players have the desired impact? And We're talking about Kemper, Edmondson, Jeannot, and Foegele. And I mean, I just don't know that you can find anything bad to say. I don't think you can find anything that isn't like excessively good to say about really any of them. I mean, we'll just start with Kemper. He's been one of the best goalies in the league this year.
Yeah, and his numbers are right up there with the best goaltenders that we've seen this season. There was a question mark. You know, the last 3-4 years we've done this, hasn't the question been about how will the Kings goaltending be?
Yeah.
And it always turns out to be okay. It's really never an issue. And it certainly hasn't been an issue this year with Darcy Kemper. Consistent. His numbers have been good. I think on only 3, maybe 4 games, he's allowed more than 3 goals. So he gives you a chance to win every night, and that's huge.
And I like the way his personality has fit in. Again, they knew that, right? Because we've had him here before. But that's the other thing. Nick, I mentioned, it's recent, but the game against the Islanders, I thought there was a couple plays, and I'm glad Jim Hiller saw it the way I did. Because during the game, we're winning basically the whole game, and I know a lot of my comments were negative, but Jim Hiller said he did not like that game last night.
Right.
He talked about the penalties, but he talked about you're not taking penalties if you're in the other team's zone. If you're playing better, you're not in a situation to take those penalties. But I mentioned to you, Nick, a couple times where Darcy Kemper was the calmest guy on the ice. Yeah, and I think that leaks through the rest of the team.
Yeah, he was in control on every shot.
Yeah,
and boy, the quality chances in that Islander game. I don't know if he's faced more in one game this season, and he was the reason for me.
Yeah,
not to take away from the penalty killers that were out there. It seemed like for half the game, but he was the reason why the Kings got 2 points in the game.
I think a lot of the reason, Nick, that the goaltending has been okay in the last few seasons when we've talked about it is that the team plays such, a stifling defensive style. But to Jim's point, there have been tons of games where Darcy Kemper faced, a lot of rubber. And I mean, the last 3 games, Nick, before Jim hopped on, we said, if you wanted to, you could dissect those games and nitpick them to death and say, well, the 2-1 win in overtime against St. Louis, it should have been more favorable of an outcome to the Kings. The 6-5 win over the Golden Knights, they gave up those 3 goals in the third period. And in the New York game, they gave up the 2 goals that were called back. Or I shouldn't say they gave up, but they had, the Islanders interfered with the goaltender twice. But either way, I just picked 20 games as an arbitrary minimum number of games played. Save percentage, Darcy Kemper is tied for 5th best in the league and is right behind Logan Thompson at 916, and Darcy Kemper's 915. And goals against average, he's tied for 2nd best at 2.29. And Jim, I haven't really gotten a sense of his personality, but what his home record is and just the way the team seems to respond, it's got to be. I mean, he's obviously not a jerk.
It's this that when I allude to his personality is that he's low maintenance. He doesn't need to be the star. He doesn't need to be looked upon as the guy. He just needs to know that you like what he's doing. That's all. Very low maintenance.
Good enough. Next up on the list of new guys is Joel Edmondson. And I was not part of the chorus of people who was, calling for resignations based on the contract that Joel Edmondson got. But I definitely was a little bit leery of the addition. I've been totally stunned at the contribution of Joel Edmondson this season. I seem to be the only person who's amazed at how many minutes he's playing, because I keep trying to bring it up and keep telling people that he's playing more minutes than Andrei Kopitar and Andrei Kempe, which blows my mind, and it doesn't seem to impress anybody else. He's, Nick, you mentioned Warren Fogel's plus minus. We'll get to him in a second. Joel Edmondson is 2nd on the team, I think, in plus minus. He plays a ton of minutes. He's got more points than I ever thought he'd have. Never mind the physical element never mind the uncomfortability that they brought him in to provide. He's providing everything. And it caught me completely off guard. I just wasn't expecting it.
I really didn't know what to expect. I knew he was a solid NHL defender.
Right.
Because playing in the East, of course, he started in St. Louis, but he was in the East for a while. We never got a chance to see him a lot. But he was exactly what the team needed on the blue line, a bigger presence, because you're trying to build a team to be better in the postseason. And when you have a 6'5" defenseman with experience who's physical, can move the puck halfway decent, okay, check that box. Penalty kill has been top 10 in the league all year. He's been a big part of it. So like Kemper, the Kings have to be just grinning from ear to ear when people say, how do you like this new player this season? Kemper, big smile. Edmondson, big smile. Fogel, big smile. Tanner Jeannot, he's brought in. He's a role player, but he's been physical, leads the team in hits. Big smile. So if it all translates and carries over and makes the team a tougher team in the playoffs, that will be icing on the cake.
Yeah, I think when you bring expectations into it, Nick, I think Edmondson, I think he's, you kind of, and because of the role he plays, right, he's never going to be the flashy guy anyway. But I don't know if a guy I've met who really looks forward to as much as Joel does to shutting down the other team, especially late period, late game, 6-on-5, goaltender pulled. He loves it. Everyone loves to score. He loves to shut him down. And he's done that more than, I think people felt he was going to be a little bit too slow. I think they felt he wasn't going to be able to handle the minutes Jesse's talking about, but he's done all of that.
He's playing 20 minutes a game. He's a plus 18. It's just ridiculous. Only 20 penalty minutes. Like, he's not, in a constant parade to the penalty box. He's not overplaying his physicality. And, I've only had a chance to talk to him maybe 2 or 3 times in the locker room. But every time I do, I am blown away by, gosh, I hope this word doesn't get misinterpreted. The gentleness of his of the way he speaks. Like he's always in a good mood. He's always got a smile. He's not intimidating. He's, complimentary of his teammates. He seems genuinely happy to be there, to be an NHL player and to be an LA King. And like I said, I wasn't part of that course of people who was expecting the worst. But when everybody around you is expecting the worst, it's hard not to just be, just bracing yourself. Well, geez, what if they're right? And he's just been such a surprise. It's really sort of ridiculous. Next up on the list is Tanner Jeannot. And Jim, I'm going to defer to your expertise because I have read a ton of commentary online about how well Jeannot has played and all of the things that he brings to the lineup. But I confess my hockey acumen is just not high enough to catch all of it. So, Nick mentioned some of the stats that would give you a big smile on your face. And I certainly don't have any problem with the game that Tanner Jeannot plays, but I just don't see him as having the same size impact as Edmundson and Foegele, which is no knock on Jeannot. The Foegele and Edmundson have had huge impacts.
Yeah, you would not expect to have Jeannot to have the same type of impact. You would not expect that. I'm going to answer that very succinctly, if I can. Is the word intimidation in the dictionary?
Yes.
Okay, that's all you need.
All right. Good enough.
Does his job.
How about deterrent?
There you go. Nuclear deterrent. He's looked upon, as one of the best fighters. That doesn't mean you win everyone. It just means you get into everyone. And I think you're seeing now, right, that to Nick's point, maybe even to the there's not many guys that want to. There's not many that want to with him, and that's a good guy to have on your team.
And playing a role on the fourth line now. That brings us to Warren Foegele. And recently I made the error on Twitter. Somehow in my mind, I had gotten it mixed up that we traded Victor Arvidsson for Warren Foegele. And that is not what happened. Victor Arvidsson was allowed to test free agency, and the Kings let him go, and Edmonton signed him, and the Kings signed Warren Foegele. I was an unabashed Victor Arvidsson supporter. I loved his game. I talked about him all the time. I didn't think it was possible that there would be a player to come along and make me forget about Victor Arvidsson. But obviously in my mind, I've enjoyed Warren Foegele's season so much that I just thought of, in my brain, I just made it a 1-for-1 trade. I linked the two of them automatically, even though that's not at all what happened. Nick, you mentioned consistency. Warren Foegele, he's killing penalties. He's playing 5-on-5. And listen, as a bald man, I've said this plenty of times, and I'm going to keep saying it. I have gotten over jealousy of a great head of hair decades ago. I was in my early 20s when I stopped caring about that sort of thing.
So that means you're jealous of me or Warren?
Warren Foegele. When I look at Warren Foegele's hair, it makes me angry that he should be, an NHL player and have a head of hair like that. It actually drives me crazy.
That is flow, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it's incredible. It's really, truly impressive.
Well, not only is he consistent, but okay, what you're saying, Jesse, is he's got the best hair on the team.
I think he might have the best hair in the league. And it's not that it's long or flowing or anything. It's just, I don't know what it is. I'm smitten.
I think he might have the best hair in the world.
Well, it's in the conversation.
Well, it's, like the other players we've talked about that are new to the organization this year, it's hard to find any negatives, really. We talked about Kemper and his numbers and Edmundson. Are there any negatives with any of these players when you consider why they were brought in and what role they were expected to play? I didn't think Foegele was this good. And he might be having, statistically, he's probably going to have the best season of his career. He had, 20 goals last year in Edmonton for a team that went to the final. I think that was his career high. And he's in his prime. He should be able to provide what we're seeing now for a number of years. What was it, a 4-year contract I think he signed. I can't say enough good things about him. He's been he's been exciting. He's been fun. He's been very rewarding to watch play all year.
Yeah, I think he's exceeded expectations. Again, I give Edmondson the edge there. Again, it's a different type of player, and maybe the greatest example on the Kings this season of opportunity. Was he given that opportunity? Was in Carolina? Was he given that opportunity in Edmonton? It's hard in Edmonton, right? Because they front load everything. But I've been impressed with his smarts and how he gets around the ice, and mostly from a penalty kill standpoint. And then the other thing that's exceeded my down low into the kind of the traffic areas, the jams, the reach arounds, and trying to shove it around, all those types of areas. I think because when you watch him play, right, his skating kind of stands out, but he gets to traffic too, and I think that's the biggest thing that surprised me.
And I want to pause and give credit to a part of the staff that honestly, I don't even know who they are. I don't know who the Kings pro scouting staff is. But if you go back over the last 3 or 4 years and you look at the additions that the team has made, not through the draft, but through adding NHL players, whether it's Alex Edler or Troy Stetcher or Cam Talbot or Darcy Kemper or Warren Fogle or Victor Arvidsson or Phil Deneau or Joel Edmondson, like Rob Blake and whoever it is that's on the pro scouting staff, they know how to find NHL players to come in and contribute and play the way that they want them to. And I think it's an underrated part of this franchise's 4-year run now.
Yeah. And the other thing with Fogle, you've got to remember, the Kings have seen him play against them about 30 times in the 3 years he was with the Edmonton Oilers.
Yeah.
So, I think probably, well, it's always the case, isn't it, where your head coach does have some input when management is looking to add players. But if you're Jim Hiller watching Warren Fogle for that long, especially in playoff games, and you can determine whether or not you think he's going to be a help in that situation, because that's what the Kings are looking for ultimately, be a better team in the playoffs. But yeah, I mean, the 4 guys we've been talking about, home run, grand slam.
Yeah, it's like my old baseball games, 4 for 4.
Well, and you were listed on the stat sheet I saw on the last telecast as having a 4-game goal scoring streak as well back there, and I think it was 1983.
You can find anything in numbers, Jesse, to get my name on the screen.
Sure.
And plus, $100 tip, that gets you on there easy.
So the question is here, guys, Foxy.
Yeah.
Did it end at 4? Do you know, or did you go longer?
You know what? I don't know. I never really ever thought. I was so much in my own head as a player. It's, thinking way too much. I don't know if I ever slowed down enough to even think about that.
Well, this is the beauty of the internet. I can look it up and tell you.
Wow.
It might take me a second.
But I think it was like players 22 and under. I think that was.
Do you happen to remember what month it was? Oh, no, there it is. 4 games. You had a goal against Vancouver, Calgary, Winnipeg, and the North Stars. And it was the 4 of the last 5 games, and then scoreless against Vancouver in the last game of the season.
Oh, what the heck. They must have been resting me.
There you go. There you go. Well, you only played. Oh, it doesn't have your minutes on ice. Sorry. Those numbers were not kept back then.
But the interesting thing is there on that list that we showed on the telecast, half of them were players that Foxy played with. So he had immeasurable impact.
Sure. Could have had assists.
Most players having goal streaks as well.
Yeah. Numbers don't lie, guys.
No. So we're going to sort of backtrack a little bit here on the next question, because it's how will goaltending impact the season? We already talked about Darcy Kemper, but between Kemper and Riddick, obviously Riddick has struggled a little bit of late. But I mean, goaltending again, Nick, you said the last few years, this has been a question, and the last few years, it hasn't been a problem. And this is another season where, at least through 3/4 of the season, goaltending has been a strength, not a weakness.
Yeah. And come the playoffs, Darcy will be the guy, obviously. And on his resume, he has a Stanley Cup. with Colorado, so he's been through the pressure cooker in those types of situations. So you have to feel very comfortable heading into round one in 5-6 weeks.
Jim, you and I, the three of us have talked about the defensive style that the Kings play and their focus on it. But this season, an abandoning of the 1-3-1, they lose Matt Roy, Drew Doughty gets hurt. There were a million reasons to be alert as to, more dangerous chances that the goalies might face this season. But even when they do, a new goaltending coach too, which I'm not sure how much of a difference that has. We've had a chance to talk to Mike Buckley. He's a funny guy. So hard to know, what kind of influence, and it's not just a change of the goalie coach, right? It's a development of the entire staff. It's the building of a goaltending department, new goaltenders, new structure. But it seems to have worked out.
I think that just the biggest difference, I'll just start, just trying to contrast.
Mm-hmm.
The effort and energy expended into playing defense in the 1-3-1 versus what the Kings are now is the same. It's just that in the 1-3-1, you're backing off more. You're still working to get into a defensive position, and in the end, you still expend the same amount of energy. The way they play now, it's a little bit more aggressive up the ice. As opposed to, always forcing the dump in, you're trying to at times force a turnover as well as just forcing them to dump it in. I'll admit I've seen more conservative. I've seen some 1-4s. So again, every team has to have a certain part, game, the score, the time, all that. But so I haven't really noticed a huge difference from the 1-3-1. Now, again, the 1-3-1's main objective is to put the puck on one side of the ice, run the opposition out of the time once they get over the red line and force them to dump it in, and have a defenseman, the right defenseman, ready to go back and pick it up, along with a winger to help out there. Okay, so now they're probably allowing more entries with possession, but then they're in a better position to go the other way. I thought the best, who was it? The Vegas game, and Nick, how many times did I say to you, I'm just watching what the Kings are doing with the puck here, right? Because they still have to get better there. You can defend all you want, but you still got to go the other way. And in that game, they did. They went the other way, and they were supporting the puck. Wasn't one guy, although it was, Fogel's goal wasn't a one-man issue. That was neutral zone, build up speed, make a pass. I was impressed there. So just keep incorporating a little bit more of that into that. And, does it leave the goalies out? Yeah, maybe the chance against the quality rises. But for the most part, especially when you're talking about Kemper, he has risen too.
Now, let me ask you this, Jim. Based on the change in the system and the fact the Kings are still, for most of the year, they were number one in fewest shots allowed per game. So that leads me to believe, despite changing the system, defensively, they still haven't given up much. Does that surprise you? And why do you think that is?
To have the numbers they did, yes. Why? To me, it's a cliche, but the buy-in has been there, even more, to a bigger extent. I remember having a chat with Mikey Anderson just when the Kings were hitting their stride. So let's say game 45 or so. When they had the start, they were up and down, been since the start, really consistent. He just said to me, he said, there's a different feel this year. And I agreed with him. And we can go and break it down into systems, but I think the commitment has been there. And we've heard it a million times. You don't want to let the guy next to you down. You don't want to let him down. And I do get that feeling. So that comes from design of the system, communication of that system to the players, work out in practice and how they do that, and then do the players believe it's going to work. And I think for the most part, the entire group, the staff, the players, have believed in it.
Second to last question is, how will the rest of the Pacific Division and the Western Conference perform? And I think no surprises that Vegas and Edmonton performed or are performing very well, although Edmonton appears to be struggling as of late. They are 3-7-0 in their last 10 games. No surprise that Vegas is very good, 7-2-1 in their last 10. To me, though, Nick, the biggest, I don't know if it's a surprise, but the biggest disappointment of a season for a team is the Vancouver Canucks. Them and Calgary, in my mind, they sort of have spent the last, I don't want to say like 15 years, 1 year on, 1 year off, 1 year on, 1 year off, and you never really know which version of those two teams you're going to get. They're both sort of now neck and neck for the bottom wild card spot, and they're certainly not, they're not out of the Kings' rearview mirror by any stretch of the imagination. But based on the season that Vancouver had last season, I think that they would have been probably projected by a lot of so-called experts to have a much stronger season than they've had this year.
Yeah, I think with Vancouver, it's all internal, right?
Yeah.
They've got to figure out what they have, what's going to work going forward, what's not going to work, and how do we tweak it. They've already tweaked it during the season with the big trade of JT Miller, and arguably their most talented player is not playing well, and that would be Pettersson. So, and then the Demko situation, really good goaltender, has been in and out of the injured list all season long, and currently right now is not available. So, yeah, big disappointment there, but I think they've got to sort things out within moving forward. And Calgary, give them credit. They basically said, hey, we just want guys here that want to play in Calgary. And they cleaned out some people. They brought in some younger players. And right now, to me, they've got the rookie of the year. If they make the playoffs, it's going to be because of goaltender Dustin Wolf, who is a rookie. So Calgary probably more defined as to why they're succeeding. Vancouver not succeeding because of the reasons I gave you a few moments ago. But everybody keeps waiting for Calgary to fall off, and they just hang in there. And how many games do they win, low-scoring games, because they're getting good goaltending from Wolf?
Yeah, I can't. Very few people can believe the last time I looked, they were 31st in the NHL in offense, the Calgary Flames, second to last. And yet, right there. So, yes, they have to be doing something without the pucks. And, it's one of the few times you can be successful crying wolf. But sorry about that.
It's a good line.
Okay.
It's a good line is a good line.
Well timed.
Yeah. Vancouver, I'm going to use almost historic, which the personality conflict in the locker room has killed that team. And are they building it back up? Well, we'll see. But they've got issues. And Nick went through that, so I don't have to. With the Oilers, I think it's the best chance if the Kings meet them for the Kings to beat the Oilers, and it has nothing to do with Edmonton. It probably has more to do with that belief and commitment I was talking about earlier. I think they have as good a chance to beat them than they have in the three previous tries in the playoffs. But I will say this. Two guys that are not with Edmonton right now, Trent Frederick and Evander Kane. Physical players that if they get healthy and get back, that's a big, big addition to an area that the Oilers probably have lacked.
So I'm going to use that to move into the final question, and which is, what do the Kings need to improve on over the last, it's not 20 games, but the last 20 or so games to be ready for the playoffs? Now, Jim, on Kings Talk earlier this week, I don't remember how we got onto it, but I was talking to a caller and I said, things can change in the NHL and they can change fast. Doesn't really matter what we're talking about. So before this 3-game win streak, the Kings were closer to being caught by Calgary or Vancouver than they were to passing Edmonton for home ice. They win 3 in a row. Now they're a point behind Edmonton with a game in hand, and 7 or 8 points between them and Calgary and Vancouver. You talk about being in a better position to beat Edmonton, for the for the fourth potential matchup in a row. How important would home ice be in that matchup?
It's proven to be. Jim Hiller tinkers with his line combinations, all that. DJ Smith, the defense pairs, 11 and 7, all that all year long. You get that settled. You work. I think, and Jim didn't go away from it. He admitted basically that his ability to control matchups at home has a bigger effect on the Kings than a lot of teams. So there you go with your home record. You're doing it that way. Two areas. One that we've discussed all year, power play, right? It has to be a factor. Doesn't have to be 42%, doesn't have to be 30%. It just has to be kind of in there to help at the right time, early goal, late goal. And then something I was just talking about, and I still think the Kings have a ways to go because you can't abandon that tight checking, but it's the transition, what they do when they create a turnover, what they can do and how quickly they can go on offense after they play solid defense to create that turnover. Jesse, it's been a while ago when you talked and you mentioned it. I said it was the smartest thing I've ever heard you say. Sometimes when you're expending that much energy on defense, you don't have enough to go the other way. Well, if the Kings can find it, they found it in the Vegas game, and that's few and far between. But that's what I would be looking for as kind of the wild card. It's not something you think about with the LA Kings, how quickly they can counterattack, but I think that's huge.
Nick, I can't remember how many years ago it was. It was 3 or 4 years ago, or maybe it was 5 years ago. I don't remember. But we were having a conversation like this, and you said kind of plaintively, who's going to score the goals? Like, where are the goals going to come from? And this is a team that just doesn't score a lot of goals. They're not totally anemic on offense, but their leading scorers are all well under point per game players. Jim talked about the importance of the power play. I understand that maybe the numbers sort of dispel the rumor of home ice advantage as being as important as maybe we'd all like to believe that it is. But when you're playing the same team that's beaten you 3 years in a row and they've had home ice advantage every single time, I just have to believe that at puck drop game one, if somehow it was actually at Crypto.com Arena in front of 18,800 and however many Kings fans there are, I just think the place would be out of control. I just think people would go psychotic. I just think it would have to have an impact.
Yeah. Second smartest thing you've ever said, Jesse.
Thank you.
A couple of things. I think, and don't quote me on this, but I think I'm pretty close. I think in the last 3 playoff series with Edmonton, of course, Edmonton's had home ice started each series with the first 2 in Edmonton. But I think the Kings' home record is something like 2-6
Oy.
in the playoffs against Edmonton. Now, that being said, the way the Kings now play at home since Jim Hiller took over, it's something we haven't seen in franchise history. They're on pace right now to have the best home record they've ever had by far. I don't think the Kings have ever won more than 26 home games in a season, and they're already at 21 with 13 left. So, and they've had the best home record all season in the NHL. So I think, when the playoffs start, everybody says, hey, the 82 games we just played, forget about it. It's a new season. It is, but just the confidence you can have knowing that it's your building and how much success you've had, I think that would be a factor. I really do.
Nick, you said a stat on the telecast last night. I guess it was. I've sort of lost track of what day it is anymore. And you said it out loud, and I thought to myself, that can't possibly be true. And it took 2 seconds to verify that it was. You said the Kings haven't lost in regulation at home more than 3 times this season. And I just thought, I can remember at least 3 games where people were really upset at home losses. And then I went and looked it up and I was like, yeah, that was it. Those were the 3 games. There was the 1-0 loss to Buffalo where people were booing at the end of the game, which at the time I was like, yeah, I get it. I feel sorry for you if you came to this game. I think I apologize. And now looking back on it, I'm like, oh, grow up. says they haven't lost but 3 times in regulation at home. Like, I'm sorry you bought a ticket to one of the 3, but like, try again, which is too callous a thing to say. But
Buffalo, Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh was the last time they lost at home in regulation. That was late January. So I have to look it up, but I think the third loss might have been to another non-playoff team, or maybe it was Edmonton early in the season. I'm not sure, but yeah, the home record's just been incredible.
Guys, whether it's been drilled into me as a player or now as a broadcaster and hear from coaches, process. The Kings won in Vegas, right? 1-goal game in which they almost collapsed. They win at home against the New York Islanders 4-1. They played way, way, way better in Vegas than they did against the New York Islanders. That's why you got to focus on the process. You got to focus on what needs to be improved, how well you played. I think David Riddick had a tough night in Vegas. I think the Kings' goals were pretty much all good attacks. I don't really remember one where I'd go, Aiden Hill won. Yeah, goalies won every goal back. But so that's why, and it's hard to do that. Just like you said, people, they go to those games and maybe those are the only 3 games they went to all year. If they did, we've got to find them and pull their seats.
That's right.
I just looked it up. Just looked it up, Jesse. The 3 regulation losses this year, Buffalo, Vancouver, and Pittsburgh, 3 non-playoff teams.
There you go.
Now, wasn't Pittsburgh? Pittsburgh was one I was expecting. I think it was an emotional game before.
Yeah.
Let me see.
There was a pre-game ceremony, wasn't there, for something?
Oh, yeah. It was coming back from the fire, coming back from the first game back after a road trip in which the Kings went and won that first game in Winnipeg. Yeah. Very emotional, away from your families. You're traveling quite a bit. I believe it was a 5-game trip. The numbers tell us that a first game back after that, not only the Kings, around the league, it's a hard win. And then you add on top of that the emotional impact of what was going on in our community. I think that game was expected.
Last, I'm going to add an 11th question, and I'm sorry, I'm going to spring this one on you, Jim. My favorite stat of the season is that they're 28-0-2 when they score 3 goals or more. Is that more about scoring goals, or is that more about how the team plays defense?
First of all, Jess, I'd make the assumption that every team has similar records.
Yes. I think the Ducks are like, when the Kings were like 16-0-1, I think the Ducks were like 13-0-1. So somebody's like, hey, they're copying us. And I was like, no, I think when you score 3 goals, you're going to win most of your games. But
so right now we have to, give tribute to the sage, Daryl Sutter, for the 3-2 league.
It's a 3-2 league, yeah, for sure.
Right. If you get that 3, you're going to do it. Yeah. I mean, I still, because of the way it's gone, and again, that just a little extra bit of commitment and belief, I think the defense has. I'd still give the edge to the defense there. Just believing. And we talked to Alex Laferriere today about just the whole stuff. And Jim Hiller said it, when you play the solid, you're around, you have a chance. You're giving yourself a chance. And I think for the most part, the Kings are giving themselves a chance. It's changed a little bit of late. There's been some holes in the penalty kill right of late, the last little while. So just make sure those things are shored up and give yourself a chance.
And Nick, I'll throw you an extra one that I didn't warn you about, and I apologize if this is out of line, but it's your final season. We've now reached the 3/4 mark. Are you finding yourself taking little moments at different buildings or spots in the league and just, taking a moment to soak it all in?
Yes and no. People, that's been the question I've been getting a lot this season.
I'm sure.
People in our organization and outside, are you nostalgic? And pretty much no, but, a lot of the Eastern cities I'm done with. I'm done with the Canadian cities. although now we're going back to Edmonton to do that last regular season game on TV and likely for the playoffs again. But, I think it's a combination, Jesse, of I'm able to determine my retirement on my own terms. I've been having this, it's been on my radar for a couple of seasons. So it's been a slow buildup to when it comes to an end in a couple of months. So, maybe I'll feel it on my last broadcast. I don't know. But if it's the playoffs, I don't know if that will be my last broadcast.
That's
right?
Fair. Yeah, that's fair.
If it's a game
Hopefully
7,
we'll know before game 82 if the playoffs are going to happen.
Yeah, no, but I've enjoyed every minute of every game with everybody I've worked with, and these are the memories I'll have, and I'll miss it, but I'm looking forward to the new phase in my life.
Well, I appreciate both of you guys joining me for this episode. Usually I go on and on at the end of these episodes. For right now, I feel like I've talked about myself plenty over the last 4 or 5 episodes. So I'll just say, particularly right now, this was a real treat for me, getting to talk to you guys for an hour about Kings hockey. So thanks as always for everything. And thanks for both of you for checking in on me. I appreciate it.
Anytime, Jess.
Our pleasure, Jess. Thanks.
Thank you for listening, Kings fans. About quarter of the season left to go. We'll talk to you soon.